Moving on, the Artemis mission. I didn't talk about it at all. This was one of those missions that was delayed so much. There's so many delays for it. But now we have it, and we have the first mission. It launched using the SLS. I think it's called the Sol Singular Launch System or Solar Launch System from Pad 39B at the Kennedy Space Center, November 16th. You see it come off, starts to rotate, and then you see it kind of go boom, and it goes and it passes right by the moon, right by the dark side. There it is after liftoff. Orion traveled approximately 40,000 miles beyond the moon and returned to Earth over the course of 25 and a half days. And this is a test mission as well, to keep that in mind. So this is ultimately going to be a manned mission to the moon where they ultimately set up a base on the moon. Orion service module will also perform the first of a series of burns to keep Orion on course towards the moon approximately 8 hours after its launch. In the coming days, mission controllers at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston will conduct additional checkouts and course corrections as needed. Flyby November 21st of the moon. And then separation, thousands of people helping support it. Awesome. And then you have the touchdown. This happened a couple days ago. You can see Pat goes down in the Pacific Ocean, traveling more than 1.4 million miles on a path around the moon and returning to Earth safely, completing the Artemis 1 flight test. All right. During the mission, Orion performed two lunar flybys coming within 80 miles of the lunar surface. At its furthest distance during the mission, Orion traveled nearly 270,000 miles from our home planet, more than 1,000 times further than where the International Space Station orbits Earth. With Orion safely returned to Earth, we can now begin to see our next mission on the horizon, which will fly crew to the moon for the first time as part of the next era exploration, said Jim Free, a NASA Associate Administrator for the Exploration Systems Development Missions Directorate. This is the start of something that's going to change the world. And this is a great article speaking about what their plans for the moon are. Andrew Tarantola. Amid the pantheon of Greek gods, few are more revered than Artemis, goddess of the hunt, chastity, and the moon, mistress of animals, daughter of Zeus, and twin sister to Apollo. Famed for her pledge to never marry, feared from that time she turned the peeping Actaeon into a stag and set his own hunting dogs upon him. Artemis has stood as a feminist icon for millennia. It seems only fitting then that NASA names after her a trailblazing mission that will see both the first woman and first person of color set foot on the moon, ahead of humanity's first off-planet colony. They've been naming it for Lumba Bum, 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 bum. Here is a video made by them. This is 11 minutes if you want to check it out. This is kind of just you can kind of see how big these things are, and stage 4 RS-20. They're really building these things up so that they can have human piloted missions to the planet itself, and they're going to have grand ideas of what they're going to do on this entirely different place. It's going to change science. It's going to change our lives. Under the Artemis program, humanity will explore regions of the moon never visited before, uniting people around the unknown, the never see, and the once impossible, said Jim Bridenstine in 2020. We will return to the moon robotically beginning next year, send astronauts to the surface within 4 years, and build a long-term presence on the moon by the end of the decade. He said that in 2020. It's about to be 2023. Let's go. The Artemis program was held further in 2017 when President Trump signed Space Policy Directive 1, provides for a U.S.-led integrated program with private sector partners for a human return to the moon, followed by missions to Mars and beyond. The moon landing goal pushed up 4 years to 2024, though its original goal of Mars in the 2030s remained unchanged. So they're speeding things up in terms of the moon. But boom, here is this Artemis Phase 1, Path to the Lunar Surface. You can see right here. Artemis 1, first human spacecraft to the moon in the 21st century. Then Artemis 2, first humans to orbit the moon in the 21st century. Artemis support mission, first high-powered solar electric propulsion system. And then another Artemis support mission, first pressurized module delivered to Gateway. So they're starting to build something in orbit. Artemis support mission. This is the third one. Human landing system delivered to Gateway. So a way to get to and from the moon. Artemis 3, crewed mission to Gateway and lunar surface. Now on the bottom, you can see, kind of going left to right. Starting with Artemis 1, early South Pole missions. First robotic landing on eventual human lunar return and in-site resource utilization site. First ground truth of polar crater volatiles. I'm not sure what that means. And then also commercial lunar payload services, delivered science and technology payloads. This is during the first two Artemis missions. So when humans are going to be orbiting the moon, you're going to have these things on the surface for them for later missions. Then around the time where the support missions are coming to help build that orbiter, large-scale cargo lander, increased capabilities for science and technology payloads. You're going to have that coming up next. And then finally, humans are going to be on the moon with that Artemis 3 mission. And this graph is saying it'll about be 2024. First crew leverages infrastructure left behind by previous missions. So that's where the humans come. They'll go to the early South Pole missions, commercial lunar payload services, and that large-scale cargo lander. All of that cargo they're going to interact with. Now it talks about Space Launch System is what it's called. Got it. You kind of see the rockets right here, how big they are, the Orion spacecraft itself. Once again, it's a really good article talking about all the things that you need. So Artemis support missions. We need several years in orbit on the surface of the moon to build operational confidence for conducting long-term work and supporting life away from Earth before we can embark on the first multi-year human mission to Mars, Bridenstine said in 2020. The sooner we get to the moon, the sooner we get American astronauts to Mars. And we definitely want to get people there. But before we can build confidence in our ability to survive on Mars, we need to build confidence in our ability to survive on the moon. And then it goes on to continue to talk about the missions that will help humans survive on the moon. The Capstone mission, for example, successfully landed a 55-pound CubeSat in June to confirm NASA's math for the much larger Gateway future orbital path. While in orbit, the Capstone will communicate and coordinate some of its maneuvers with the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, which has been circling the moon since 2009. In 2023, NASA also plans to launch the Viper robotic rover to the moon's south pole. That was what you saw in the graph earlier, where it will search the lowest, darkest, coldest craters for accessible water ice. Finding a source for H2O is of paramount importance to the long-term viability of the colony. In space, water isn't just for drinking and bathing. It can be split into its component atoms and used to fuel our oxidizing rockets, potentially turning the moon into an orbital gas station as we push further out from Earth, which I support. The rover and others like it will be delivered to the surface as part of NASA Commercial Lunar Payload Services program. Talking about possibility for that on the moon. So this is the Gateway Integrated Spacecraft configuration. Going to go through all this human landing system. This is a concept of what they're going to jump off of this with power and propulsion element. You see right here, that's what's going to be propelling this thing in its orbit. Once it is fully set up and these components are all there. Gateway external robotic system, not too sure. Logistics modules, airlock, a refueler, international habitation, and logistics outpost. In addition to a surface installation, NASA plans on putting a full-fledged space station dubbed the Lunar Gateway into orbit around the moon, where it will serve much the same purposes as the ISS does today. Visiting researchers will stay aboard the pressurized habitation and logistics outpost modules, will they'll have access to research features, remote rover controls, and docking for both Orion capsules from the Earth and the human landing system landers to the moon's surface. A 60 kilowatt solar plant will provide power to the station, which also serves as a communication relay hub with the planet. Interesting. And then this is going to be the place where they're going to launch off from and go down to the surface and then come right back up and go back. All right, the Artemis base camp. Here's another video of the South Pole landing site. Let's take a quick look at this. Moon rover South Pole. This is where the rover is going to go to look for water. South Pole right here. It's pretty dark. Right here on the South Pole, you can see some ice. Is there a particular place where it's going to be? And you can look. See this little spot right here with a rover chilling on the moon. Noble region. It's going to be searching for water in these areas. Okay, so that's where it's going to land. Gotcha. Artemis Base Camp. Vehicles, this is talking about rovers on there for the yep. Just as Apollo astronauts famously bounced around on the first gen rovers, will also use lunar terrain vehicles. So that's what LTVs are. Okay. When not in use, the LTVs will be parked at NASA's Artemis Base Camp at the lunar South Pole, alongside a pressurized version designed for longer duration expeditions. The surface habitat itself will be able to support up to 4 residents at a time and provide communications, equipment storage, power, and most importantly, robust radiation shielding. A site hasn't yet been officially selected, though mission planners are looking for areas near the region's permanently shadowed craters where water ice is expected to be most easily acceptable. Astronauts are going to keep getting more and more comfortable as they go onwards. And then NASA picks SpaceX's Starship for its second crewed Artemis lunar landing. This is what's going to be on the moon. It's going to be a private company that is going to take humans back to the moon for the first time since the 1960s. I believe that we did go to the moon, yes. However, if you give me a good enough argument, I could be swayed elsewhere. I don't know. If you provide me a good argument, I could say maybe. All right. Yeah, you got me. I don't know. I don't know. If you had a good argument for why the moon landing did not happen, I'm listening. I will listen. SpaceX's original contract with NASA was worth 2.9 billion. Will add 1.15 billion dollars to the total. Ooh, that's some cash. The company Starship lunar lander is expected to take astronauts for the moon for the first time in 2025. However, NASA Inspector General Paul Martin admitted in August that the agency is expecting Artemis 3 launch date to slip to 2026. NASA is anticipating delays related to the development of the human landing system in its next generation spacesuits. NASA Artemis 4 mission, which will take 4 more astronauts to the moon, will take flight in 2027 at the earliest. For now, we're waiting for updates. Boom. Okay. Okay. What does this mean for us? 2026, 2025, humans on the surface of the moon working in real time with an outpost on the moon. 2030, what happens? What is the state of the technology in this country and where does it leave us? Looking back, even looking forward, 2040, what technology is going to be in place? Are there going to be outposts at that time in 2040 on Mars? Folks, I don't think Elon Musk is going to die anytime soon. I don't think Tesla's going to slow down at all. I do hope that this civilization can move to Mars because it is important for our society to move to different planets because this planet's not going to last forever. And I feel like it is part of our responsibility to cultivate the universe, to use the resources that have been given to us. If that's how you want to describe it. But to expand our civilization and reach out into our own galaxy. The Artemis mission is one of the most important missions in years. James Webb as well, but putting people to live and to research on the moon is the first step of being able to get there and stay on another planet for a little while. I don't know if you know, but we haven't stayed a lot on the moon, even when the missions were there. You weren't spending months on the moon. Now we're talking about months, talking about years, possibly in the future, either in orbit around the moon or on the moon surface. And then going forward, possibly Mars. After Mars, possibly Europa. After Europa, possibly into the Kuiper Belt. After the Kuiper Belt, the Oort cloud. After the Oort cloud, we go to Alpha Centauri. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what this mission ultimately will leave. Maybe they completely fail and they shut it down. I wouldn't put it past them. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. Human error is a real thing. But let's hope they do it. Let's see if they do. And I hope each of you is along with me for the ride.